Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Sometimes people threaten to sue for stupid reasons, but the lady in our first story broke every possible record. People be crazy. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. I'm suing you over 35 calories. I used to work for a sub-making restaurant chain. We got ghetto people all the time, but this one woman was just too much. She asked for a sub and tried as hard as she could to avoid eye contact with me while giving orders like I'm the reason her life sucks. Also, let me mention that she asked for every single vegetable on her sub, so it seriously couldn't close if I tried. She then asked for light mayo. I explained that even though the light mayo bottle was there, it's actually all regular mayo right now. She understood and told me to go ahead, so I grabbed the closest mayo bottle and put some on. That was a mistake. She looked at me like I just climbed on the counter and crapped in her sandwich. Apparently she wanted light mayo, even though she knows they're both regular. At this point, I didn't have a response for that, so I got a knife and got all the mayo off. This apparently wasn't good enough for her, so she said, "After you make my sandwich, I'm going to call your upper management and sue you for putting something I didn't want on my sandwich." It's effing rush hour, mid-lunch, and she's going to hire a lawyer to battle the largest fast food chain over mayonnaise? So I finished her sandwich and did the best I could to close it. Remember the mountains of toppings? And she said because it's not closed all the way and stuff is falling out, she doesn't want it. Now, I was used to crappy people, but I literally watched her sit in the lobby and call corporate and had a conversation for at least 15 minutes. Needless to say, I have yet to go to court. And our second story. Manager told me I was fired. I worked for a car dealership as a lot porter. I'd gotten into an accident that totaled my car right as I was purchasing a house, which led to a predicament because you don't want to buy a new car while buying a house. Shortly after buying the house, I found a different job in a field I love. So I put in my 2 weeks' notice, and then I went and bought a car from a different dealership because my wife wanted a specific car that my dealership did not sell. I also knew how slimy the one I worked for was. A few days after the purchase of both house and car, one of the sales managers asked me if I was ready to buy a car from him. I didn't disclose the fact to anyone that I bought from a different dealer. I informed him I already bought one, so he looks at me in the most serious face and asks if I wanted to pack my things, basically because I wasn't loyal to this dealership. Knowing I already had a better job that was able to start me immediately, I said sure, and turned and walked away to pack my things. He then realized I wasn't going to put up a fight, so he immediately started laughing and told me he was joking and how they would never fire anyone for going somewhere else, but I already knew a few people that had gotten fired for that exact reason. I told him I don't appreciate being fired as a joke because first, I do have a 1.5-year-old son, and if I didn't have a job lined up, he could have seriously hurt me financially. But I ended up leaving feeling relieved because this was not a good job. The funny thing is, he called me about 30 to 45 minutes after I left because I'd left keys to multiple brand new trucks in my desk that had to have the plastic removed and get parked. Turns out, since he fired me, they made him take care of the stuff. I'm now fully enjoying my new job with the best bosses I've ever had. I know I probably took it too far, but I don't regret it. And our last story. Mock the disabled? Justice is served many years later. This is a story about a piece of crap receiving their deserved karma several years later. Many years ago, I worked in the lovely career of retail. It's sadly normal for there to be a constant flow of shop scum that make you despise their existence, and there are those that are so horrific that what they do is burned into your mind forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments allowed me to extract my revenge. I'd only worked in retail for 1 year in this newly built store and was starting to settle in. Getting to know the great customers and understanding that some people shouldn't be allowed outside, which, being a shy person who hates conflict, wasn't the best, but at least one of my customers was an absolutely adorable elderly lady who always made time to talk and was an absolute joy to be with. It had been some weeks since I'd last seen her, but one morning I see her car park in the disabled parking bay, as she already has a blue badge, only this time she hobbled out of the car on crutches with a pot on her leg. I didn't have a chance to talk to her yet when a works truck, which did not have a blue disabled badge, pulled into the disabled space next to her, and out jumped an early 40s builder with their teenage kid. Well, this little old lady was having none of this and must have absolutely massive balls of steel, and stood up to this ignorant builder and politely informed them that they shouldn't be parking there as it's for the disabled and he doesn't have a badge. What happened next? I can't forget. This builder decided the best course of action was to humiliate and insult this poor elderly lady in crutches, accuse her of faking her disability, and claim the cast on her leg was a fake, and that she probably milks the benefit system for as much money as possible, then walks off putting on an over-dramatic fake limp, laughing away with her teenage kid whilst the old lady stood there in shock. Sadly, being one who lacks courage, I did absolutely nothing about it, and that would stick with me forever. I tried feebly to ask a manager later to do something about it, but they didn't care or want to get involved. For years I worked in this store, always seeing this scum builder come in and out. Fortunately, I never interacted with this scum builder, but I saw them often, and every time I did, I would always remember what they had done vividly. I would still see them park in the disabled bays, and even got to the point where I would recognize them by the large blue Mercedes they drove. 7 years later, I was still working in this store, and this scum was still parking in disabled and looking like an absolute C-word. Yet, this year, I was blessed with good fortune, and our store was outfitted with some absolute joyful equipment. Due to the high number of complaints, our store had set up a company to deal with the parking violations, but instead of having external parties come in and ticket cars, the staff of the store were given the ticketing machine, and it was our duty to go to the car park and record any cars that violated the parking rules. This was all done digitally, and there would be no paper tickets upon the cars. This was brilliant. As soon as I found out, I knew what I was going to do. It didn't take long for me to learn how to use the machine, and it certainly didn't take long for the opportunity to get revenge, and so it began. There were 3 rules for parking, and if you break these rules, there's a lovely 30-pound fine in return each time it happened. The first rule, no parking in disabled without a badge. And I know well the scum builder's certainly violating this rule, and it wasn't long until I saw him next, and as soon as he entered the store, I quickly scurried out with the ticketing machine, and lo and behold, there was the oversized blue Mercedes in the closest disabled bay with no badge. I smashed their car details in with some well-shot photos and sent the report off so they'd receive a lovely letter of their fine they would ask to pay. That's not enough, though. But fortunately, it takes weeks for them to finally receive the ticket, which grants me the opportunity to constantly ticket their parking violations, because as you would expect, the scum would always park in disabled, and as I worked at the front of the store, I would always know when they had parked. After ticketing their car dozens of times, the scum unfortunately learned their lesson as their oversized blue Mercedes no longer appeared in disabled parking bays. But as you expect, the scum would still be scum, and they would find their new parking space inside child parking. Rule 2. Don't park inside child parking without a child. Had this scum gotten enough, I thought? Of course not. They haven't learned their lesson and continue to be a complete wanker and park in the child parking, which we didn't have many spaces for. At this point, I knew all their car details by heart and would gleefully fill out the ticket machine as I skipped over to their car violating the child parking and take photos needed for them, including shots of their car seats that bear no child seats in them. And as it became routine, this once again carried on a few weeks more of tickets being created, and eventually they start receiving the fines. Fortunately, me being me, I'm completely invisible to others and often looked over and have yet to be seen or caught. But as all good things must eventually come to an end, when the scum came into the shop, their blue turd automobile was no longer. There in child parking or disabled, had the scum finally learned their lesson? Would you be surprised if they had not? As it didn't take me long to find them. Rule 3. You must park inside a marked bay. And what a surprise, the scum still manages to F this up. They would park over the line, taking 2 spaces up. Well, guess what? That's a job for me and my ticket machine. Trying to park inside taxi parking but can't fit the big old car in it? Boom! That ain't inside a marked bay, and ka-ching, another ticket, and it's fine for them. Have one single wheel slightly over the white line of a bay? Well, guess who technically broke the rule? That's right, Scumbag did. And there goes a few more weeks of fun, until eventually Scumbag runs out of ways they can possibly break the rules, and our company hires externally to start ticketing cars so my beloved weapon of justice goes to rest. Now, I know what people are probably going to say, that all these fines are not enforceable because of blah, 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 but I honestly don't care for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm being paid to do this, so either way, my time or money isn't wasted. Secondly, it did have an effect as they repeatedly changed their parking habits. And thirdly, even if they don't end up paying, they're still going to spend a F-ton of time and effort trying to overturn them over and over again, having to constantly be harassed by mail. Overall, if all the fines are counted separate and added up, they would have received thousands of pounds worth of fines building up over time for being scum. Cherry on the top, about 3 years later, I walk by this piece of scum on the car park and watch as they scream at some innocent dude in a high-vis jacket, accusing them of being the one giving them all the parking fines, which put me at peace knowing this must have seriously got to them and caused them to still be raving mad after 3 years. I would wave at the guy on my last day and ask him if yelling at people was worth it. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.